The silence that followed his laughter was the kind that swallows rooms whole, leaving nothing but the echo of my shattered world bouncing off champagne glasses and birthday decorations. I stood there, holding the empty gift box in my trembling hands, the cruel note still fresh in my mind. "I'm leaving you, you are useless, I deserve better." The words burned like acid on my tongue as I watched him walk away, his shoulders shaking with amusement. 37 guests stared at me, their faces a mixture of shock, pity, and uncomfortable curiosity. Some covered their mouths in horror. Others looked away, unable to witness my humiliation. But what they didn't see was the small, knowing smile that crept across my lips. What they couldn't possibly understand was that while he thought he was destroying me, he had just handed me the greatest gift of all. Complete freedom to show him exactly who he was dealing with. The pregnancy test hidden in my purse would remain my secret for now. But his destruction? That was about to become very, very public. Before we continue, please write in the comment which country you are watching this video. We love knowing where our global family is tuning in from. And if this is your first time on this channel, please subscribe. Your support helps us bring even more epic revenge tales of life. Enjoy listening. The morning of my 28th birthday started like any other day, except for the flutter of excitement in my chest that felt different from usual anticipation. I pressed my hand against my still flat stomach, where a tiny life was growing. A secret I'd been carrying for 3 weeks, waiting for the perfect moment to share. Tonight would be that moment. I had planned everything down to the smallest detail. The party would be intimate, just close friends and family gathered in our apartment. After dinner, when everyone was relaxed and happy, I would stand up and make the announcement that would change everything. I could already picture his face lighting up, the way he would sweep me into his arms, the tears of joy that would follow. "Morning, beautiful," he said, sliding his arms around my waist from behind as I stood at the kitchen counter, arranging flowers for tonight's centerpiece. His voice carried that lazy morning warmth that used to make my heart skip. "Morning," I replied, leaning back against his chest. "Are you excited about tonight?" "Of course. It's going to be perfect." He kissed the top of my head, but something in his tone felt distant, distracted. "I actually have a special surprise for you." My heart jumped. Maybe he already knew somehow. Maybe he had figured it out and was planning his own announcement. "Really? What kind of surprise?" "You'll have to wait and see." He pulled away, grabbing his coffee mug from the counter. "I need to run some errands today. Last-minute party preparations." I watched him leave, noting how he avoided my eyes, how his smile seemed forced. A small knot of worry formed in my stomach, but I pushed it away. Pre-party nerves, that's all. Everything would be perfect tonight. The day passed in a blur of cooking, cleaning, and decorating. My best friend Emma arrived early to help, her arms full of balloons and streamers. "You're glowing," she said, studying my face as we hung decorations in the living room. "There's something different about you." I bit back my smile. "Just excited about the party." She tilted her head, her detective instincts kicking in. Emma had always been able to read me like an open book. "Are you sure that's all?" "Maybe I'll have some news to share later," I said, unable to completely contain my excitement. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God, are you?" "Sure." I glanced toward the bedroom where he was getting ready. "Not yet. Tonight." Emma squealed quietly and grabbed my hands. "This is amazing. He's going to be over the moon." I hoped she was right. I really, really hoped she was right. By 7 o'clock, our apartment was filled with the warm buzz of conversation and laughter. My parents had driven in from the suburbs, my college roommate flew in from Seattle, and several of our couple friends filled the space with their familiar energy. The dining table groaned under the weight of my favorite foods, and candles flickered throughout the room, casting everything in a golden glow. I moved through the crowd, accepting hugs and birthday wishes, but my eyes kept finding him across the room. He was talking to his work friends, his laugh a little too loud, his gestures a little too animated. He'd been drinking since the guests arrived, which wasn't unusual, but something about his energy felt manic, almost desperate. "Honey, you look beautiful," my mother said, pulling me aside near the kitchen. "And happy. Really happy." "Thanks, Mom." I squeezed her hand, thinking about the grandchild news I'd be sharing soon. "I am happy." "Good. You deserve it after everything you've been through." She glanced across the room at him, and for just a moment her expression tightened. "You know your father, and I just want you to be sure about." Mom, please. Not tonight. I'd heard their concerns before. They thought he was too controlling, too quick to anger, too dismissive of my career. But they didn't see the private moments, the way he could be sweet and vulnerable when it was just us. I know. I just worry sometimes. She smoothed my hair back from my face. But if you're happy, we're happy. Dinner was a success. Everyone raved about the food, the wine flowed freely, and the conversation was lively and warm. I barely ate, my stomach too full of butterflies to make room for food. Every few minutes I would catch his eye across the table and smile, trying to gauge his mood. He smiled back, but there was something hollow about it, something that made my chest tighten with unease. After we cleared the dinner plates, Emma helped me bring out the birthday cake. A chocolate masterpiece she'd ordered from my favorite bakery. Everyone sang, "Happy birthday," their voices filling the apartment with joy and love. I closed my eyes and made a wish, that our little family would be healthy and happy. When I opened my eyes, he was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Speech. Speech. Someone called out and others picked up the chant. This was it. This was the moment I'd been planning for weeks. I stood up, my heart hammering against my ribs, and looked around the room at all these people I loved. Thank you all for being here tonight, I began, my voice slightly shaky with emotion. It means the world to me to have you all here to celebrate. This has been such an incredible year, and I have some news that makes it even more special. Wait, he interrupted, standing up abruptly. His chair scraped against the hardwood floor with a harsh screech that made everyone wince. Before you say anything, I have something for you. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to him as he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, elegantly wrapped box. My heart stopped. For one wild, impossible moment I thought he was about to propose. Maybe he'd figured out about the pregnancy and wanted to make this moment even more perfect. This is for you, he said, his voice carrying across the silent room. There was something strange in his tone, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I took the box with trembling fingers, aware that everyone was watching, waiting. The wrapping paper was beautiful, silver with a delicate bow. I untied it carefully, my hands shaking slightly. Inside was a simple white box. I lifted the lid, expecting jewelry, expecting something romantic and meaningful. Instead there was a folded piece of paper. I unfolded the note with growing confusion, my eyes scanning the words once, twice, 3 times before their meaning finally penetrated my shock. I'm leaving you. You are useless. I deserve better. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at the paper, reading it again and again, hoping I'd misunderstood, hoping this was some kind of sick joke. But the handwriting was definitely his, the words clear and cruel. I looked up to find him watching me, and the expression on his face was one I'd never seen before. Calculating. Almost amused. What is this? I whispered, my voice barely audible. I think it's pretty clear, he said, and then he did something that will haunt me for the rest of my life. He laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not an uncomfortable chuckle, but a genuine, delighted laugh, as if my pain was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. I heard Emma gasp, heard my mother make a small, wounded sound. But I couldn't look away from his face, couldn't process what was happening. You're joking, I said, still holding the note. This is some kind of joke. No joke, he said, straightening his jacket. I'm done. We're done. I've been thinking about this for months, and I finally worked up the courage to do it right. Right. The word came out as a croak. You think humiliating me in front of everyone I love is doing it right? He shrugged, and that casual gesture broke something inside me. You always said you wanted honesty. The room was dead silent now. 37 people watching my world collapse in real time. I could feel their eyes on me, could sense their discomfort, their pity, their shock. Some of them were his friends too, and I could see a few of them nodding slightly as if they'd been expecting this. I can't believe you're doing this, my father said, standing up from his chair. His face was red with anger. On her birthday? In front of everyone. Sit down, old man, he said dismissively. This doesn't concern you. The hell it doesn't. Dad, please. I held up a hand, my voice surprisingly steady. I was still staring at him, this man I'd lived with for 2 years, this man whose child I was carrying, this man who had just destroyed me in the most public, humiliating way possible. And then something shifted inside me. The shock began to recede, replaced by something colder, sharper. I thought about the pregnancy test hidden in my purse, about the future I'd been planning, about the life growing inside me that he would never know about. I thought about all the times he'd made small, cutting comments about my appearance, my career, my friends. All the times he'd made me feel small and worthless, then apologized and made me believe it was my fault for being too sensitive. All the times I'd made excuses for his behavior, convinced myself that he loved me despite his cruelty. You know what? I said, and my voice was calm now, steady. I carefully folded the note and placed it back in the box. You're absolutely right. He blinked, clearly not expecting that response. What? You do deserve better. I stood up, smoothing down my dress. You deserve someone who won't call you out when you're being cruel. Someone who won't challenge you when you're wrong. Someone who will let you treat them like garbage and thank you for it. His confident smirk faltered slightly. Unfortunately for you, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word, I'm not that person anymore. I looked around the room at all the faces staring at me, some shocked, some angry, some filled with pity. Emma was crying. My mother looked like she wanted to murder him with her bare hands. My father was still standing, his fists clenched at his sides. And then I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile or a sad smile or even an angry smile. It was something else entirely. Something that made him take a step back. Thank you, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent room. Thank you for showing everyone exactly who you really are. Thank you for doing this in front of all the people who love me so they can see what I've been dealing with. And thank you for giving me the greatest gift you could possibly give me. What gift? He asked, and for the first time he sounded uncertain. Freedom, I said simply. He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head and headed for the door. Whatever. I'll come back for my stuff when you're not here. No need, I called after him. I'll have it waiting on the curb. He paused at the door, looking back at me with something that might have been regret. But then his expression hardened again. You'll regret this, he said. You'll never find anyone else who'll put up with you. I'm counting on it, I replied. And then he was gone, leaving behind a room full of stunned silence and the ruins of what was supposed to be the happiest night of my life. The silence stretched for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Then everyone started talking at once. Angry voices, concerned voices, voices trying to make sense of what had just happened. What a complete bastard, Emma said, rushing to my side. I can't believe he just did that. Are you okay, sweetheart? My mother asked, her voice thick with tears and rage. I'm going to kill him, my father announced, and several people had to physically restrain him from following through on that threat. But I barely heard any of it. I was still standing there holding the empty gift box, my mind strangely calm and clear. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something much more dangerous. Cold, calculating fury. I'm fine, I said, and everyone stopped talking to stare at me. Really? I'm fine. Honey, you don't have to pretend, my mother started. I'm not pretending. I set the box down on the table and looked around the room. I know this is awkward for everyone and I'm sorry your evening was ruined. But honestly, I'm relieved. Emma frowned. Relieved. He just showed me exactly who he is. No more wondering, no more making excuses, no more trying to fix something that was broken from the start. I picked up my wine glass and took a sip, surprised to find my hand wasn't shaking. So let's not let him ruin my birthday party any more than he already has. Are you sure you're okay? My college roommate asked gently. Because it's okay to not be okay right now. I considered the question seriously. Was I okay? My fiancé had just humiliated me in front of everyone I loved. I was pregnant with his child and he had no idea. My entire future had just been rewritten in the span of 5 minutes. But underneath the hurt and shock, something else was growing. Something that felt almost like relief. And beneath that, something darker. Something that whispered about justice and consequences and making sure he understood exactly what he'd lost. I will be, I said finally. I will be very okay. The party continued, though the mood was subdued. People kept shooting me concerned looks, offering to help clean up, asking if I needed anything. My parents wanted to stay the night, but I convinced them I was fine, that I needed some time alone to process everything. Emma was the last to leave, lingering by the door with obvious reluctance. I don't want to leave you alone, she said. What if he comes back? What if? He won't come back tonight, I said with certainty. He's probably at a bar somewhere celebrating his freedom with whoever helped him plan this little performance. You think someone helped him? I thought about the way some of his friends had reacted, not surprised enough, not shocked enough. I think this was planned. I think he's been planning it for a while. Emma's face darkened. That makes it even worse. No, I said quietly. That makes it perfect. He gave me a strange look. What do you mean? Nothing. I'm just tired. Go home. I'll call you tomorrow. After she left, I stood in my empty apartment, surrounded by the debris of my birthday party. Dirty dishes, empty wine glasses, wilted flowers. The birthday cake sat half-eaten on the counter, the candles long since blown out. I walked to the bathroom and pulled the pregnancy test out of my purse, staring at the 2 pink lines that had changed everything 3 weeks ago. He would never know about this baby. He would never have the chance to hurt this child the way he'd hurt me. And suddenly, I knew exactly what I was going to do. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The hurt was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it was overshadowed by something much stronger: purpose. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table with a notebook, writing down everything I knew about his life, his routines, his weaknesses. It wasn't revenge I was planning, not exactly. It was justice. There's a difference. Revenge is emotional, messy, destructive. Justice is calculated, precise, educational. He thought I was useless. He thought I was weak. He thought he could humiliate me and walk away without consequences. He was about to learn how wrong he was. I started with his belongings. True to my word, I packed everything he owned into boxes and left them on the curb. But not before going through them carefully, documenting everything. His expensive watch collection, his designer clothes, his electronics, his books. I photographed everything, created detailed inventories, and made sure to handle his most prized possessions with particular care. Meaning I made sure they ended up at the very bottom of the pile, where the morning dew could work its magic. By the time he came to collect his things that afternoon, half of his wardrobe was damp and his leather shoes had developed interesting water stains. When he called to complain, I answered with sweet innocence. Oh no, really? I'm so sorry. I guess I should have covered them better. But you did say you'd pick them up quickly. The frustrated growl in his voice was music to my ears. Next, I focused on information gathering. I'd lived with him for 2 years, which meant I knew things. I knew about his secret credit card debt that he'd hidden from me. I knew about the time he'd called in sick to work to go golfing with his buddies. I knew about his mother's disappointment in his career choices, and how desperately he wanted her approval. Most importantly, I knew about his new job interview next week. The one he'd been preparing for in secret, the one he thought would be his ticket to a better life without me. I spent the next few days making phone calls, sending emails, and having very interesting conversations with mutual acquaintances. Not to spread gossip, I was very careful about that. Just to share my concern about his recent behavior, his drinking, his apparent instability. I'm just worried about him, I told his boss's wife at the grocery store, making sure my voice carried just the right note of concerned ex-fiancé. The way he ended things was so erratic. I hope he's getting the help he needs. What kind of help? She asked, her eyes widening with interest. Oh, I probably shouldn't say anything. I just hope he's talking to someone professional about his anger issues. I left it at that, knowing she would fill in the blanks herself. And knowing she would absolutely share this information with her husband. The beauty of small social circles is that information travels fast, and it gets embellished along the way. By the end of the week, the story had evolved from anger issues, to violent outbursts, to restraining order, depending on who was telling it. None of which was technically true, but none of which I had actually said either. ## Chapter 6. The First Crack. A week after my birthday, Emma called with news. You're not going to believe this, she said, her voice bubbling with barely contained excitement. I just ran into his friend Tyler at the coffee shop. And apparently your ex didn't get that job he was interviewing for. Tyler said they told him they were going in a different direction, but he thinks someone said something to them. I made appropriate sympathetic noises while internally celebrating. That's too bad for him. Tyler seemed to think you might have had something to do with it. Me? What could I possibly have done? I don't even know anyone at that company. Which was technically true. I didn't know anyone at the company. But I did know someone who knew someone who knew someone. And I'd had a very enlightening conversation about the importance of character references in hiring decisions. I don't know, but Tyler seemed pretty convinced. He kept asking if you'd said anything to anyone. What would I say? That he publicly humiliated me? That he's cruel and manipulative? I mean, those things are true, but I haven't been going around telling people about them. Again, technically true. I hadn't been going around telling people. I'd been very selective about who I talked to and what I said. Well, whatever happened, Tyler said he's pretty upset about it. Apparently he really needed that job. I'm sure he'll find something else, I said mildly. Someone with his unique qualities is bound to land somewhere eventually. After I hung up, I allowed myself a small smile. The first domino had fallen. But this was just the beginning. That evening I had dinner with my parents. They'd been calling every day since the party, checking on me, offering to come stay with me, generally being wonderful and supportive. Tonight I finally felt ready to share some news. I have something to tell you both, I said as we finished our meal. My mother immediately looked concerned. What is it, sweetheart? I'm pregnant. The silence that followed was deafening. My father's fork clattered to his plate. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. How far along? My mother asked finally. About a month. I found out a few weeks ago. I was planning to tell him at the party. Oh, honey. My mother's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry, I said firmly. This baby is the best thing that's ever happened to me. And now I don't have to worry about raising it with someone who would have been a terrible father. My father cleared his throat. What are you going to do? I'm going to have this baby and love it and give it the best life possible. And he's never going to know it exists. Are you sure that's the right thing to do? My mother asked gently. I mean, legally, doesn't he have rights? Only if he knows about it. And he's never going to know. I met both their eyes steadily. I need you both to promise me that. No matter what happens, no matter how you feel about it, you will never tell him about this baby. They exchanged a look, one of those wordless conversations that couples who've been married for 30 years can have. We promise, my father said finally. But are you sure you can handle this alone? I won't be alone. I'll have you and Emma and all the people who actually love me. That's more than enough. 3 weeks later, the second domino fell. I was at work when Emma called, practically vibrating with excitement. You have to hear this, she said. I just got off the phone with my cousin who works at that marketing firm downtown. You know, the one where his friend Brad works. What about it? Brad got fired yesterday. I paused in my typing. Really? What for? Apparently, someone sent his boss screenshots of some pretty inappropriate text messages. Messages where Brad was talking about lying on his expense reports and making fun of clients. That's terrible, I said, though I was struggling to keep the satisfaction out of my voice. How did someone get his text messages? That's the weird part. The screenshots came from an anonymous email account, but they were definitely real. Brad's not denying he sent them. I made a mental note to delete that particular email account when I got home. Well, that's what happens when you put things in writing. The thing is, Tyler thinks you're behind this too. He's been telling people that you're on some kind of revenge mission. That's ridiculous. How would I even get Brad's text messages? I barely know the guy. Which was true. I barely knew Brad. But I did know his ex-girlfriend who he'd cheated on last year. And she'd been more than happy to share some interesting screenshots when I'd reached out to commiserate about unfaithful men. I know it sounds crazy, but Tyler's pretty paranoid right now. He thinks you're coming for all of them. All of them. You know, the whole group. The guys who were at the party that night. Tyler said some of them were laughing when it happened, and now he's worried you're going to target them too. I felt a cold smile spread across my face. Well, if they're worried about consequences for their actions, maybe they should have thought about that before they participated in humiliating me. So you are planning something? I'm not planning anything. I'm just living my life. If other people's bad choices are catching up with them, that's not my fault. But privately, I was already thinking about Tyler's gambling problem, and the way he'd been skimming money from his company's petty cash fund. And about Marcus, who'd been having an affair with his secretary for 6 months. And about the others who'd sat there and laughed while my world fell apart. They wanted to be paranoid? I'd give them something to be paranoid about. By the end of the month, the paranoia in his friend group had reached fever pitch. Tyler had been caught with his hand in the petty cash jar and was facing embezzlement charges. Marcus's wife had received an anonymous package containing photos of her husband's lunch dates with his secretary. Another friend had been reported to the IRS for tax evasion. Apparently, someone had provided them with detailed records of his under-the-table income. None of it could be traced back to me, of course. I was very careful about that. I used public computers, anonymous email accounts, untraceable phone numbers. And I never did anything illegal. I just made sure the right information reached the right people at the right time. The beauty of it was that I didn't have to lie or fabricate anything. These men had created their own problems through their own bad choices. I was just facilitating the natural consequences. Meanwhile, my ex was spiraling. According to Emma's intelligence network, he'd been drinking heavily, showing up late to work, and generally making a mess of his life. He'd applied for several jobs but kept getting rejected at the final interview stage. He tried to start dating again, but somehow every woman he met seemed to have heard unflattering things about him. "It's like he's cursed," Emma reported after another coffee shop encounter with Tyler. "Tyler says he can't figure out what's happening. It's like the whole universe is against them." "Maybe the universe is just balancing the scales," I suggested. I was 12 weeks pregnant now, just starting to show if he knew what to look for. I'd had my first ultrasound the week before, and the baby was healthy and perfect. I decided not to find out the gender. I wanted it to be a surprise. But I'd already started thinking of names, planning the nursery, imagining the life we'd have together. A life that would be infinitely better without him in it. 2 months after my birthday party, I was returning from a business trip to Chicago when I saw him. I just pulled into my driveway, exhausted from the flight and looking forward to a quiet evening at home, when I noticed the figure slumped against my front door. At first I thought it might be a homeless person, but as I got closer I realized who it was. He was drunk. Not just tipsy but falling down, slurring his words, completely wasted drunk. His clothes were wrinkled and stained, his hair was a mess, and he smelled like he hadn't showered in days. "There you are," he said when he saw me, struggling to his feet. "I've been waiting for hours." "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my distance. I was very aware of the baby growing inside me, of the need to protect both of us. "I know what you're doing," he said, pointing an unsteady finger at me. "I know you're behind everything that's been happening." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me," he shouted, loud enough that I saw Mrs. Patterson's curtains twitch in the house next door. "My job, my friends, everything's falling apart, and it's all because of you." "Your life is falling apart because of your own choices," I said calmly. "I had nothing to do with any of it." "Bullshit." He took a step toward me and I instinctively stepped back. "You're destroying my life because you can't handle the fact that I left you." "You didn't leave me," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "You humiliated me in front of everyone I love. There's a difference. You deserved it. You were suffocating me, always wanting to talk about feelings and the future, and you were too much of a coward to have an honest conversation about it. So instead you decided to destroy me publicly." He stared at me, swaying slightly. "I want you to stop." "Stop what?" "Whatever you're doing. The phone calls, the emails, I know it's you. I know you're sabotaging me." I looked at him, really looked at him. This man who had once seemed so confident, so in control. Now he was a mess, paranoid and desperate and broken. And I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, no anger. Just a cold, empty nothing. "I think you should leave," I said. "Not until you promise to stop." "There's nothing to stop. You're doing this to yourself." "I'll tell everyone about the baby." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at him, my heart hammering in my chest. "What baby?" He smiled, a cruel, triumphant expression. "I know you're pregnant. I figured it out. That's why you were acting so weird at the party, why you were so eager to make an announcement. You were going to tell everyone about the baby." My mind raced. How could he know? I'd been so careful, so secretive. Only my parents and Emma knew, and they would never. "Your friend Emma has a big mouth when she's drunk," he said, reading my expression. "Ran into her at a bar last week. She didn't mean to tell me, but after a few drinks she started talking about how sorry she felt for me, missing out on being a father. I was going to kill Emma. Slowly and painfully. So here's what's going to happen," he continued, his voice taking on that familiar, controlling tone. "You're going to stop whatever game you're playing, Or I'm going to tell everyone that you're pregnant with my baby and you've been hiding it from me. I'll sue for custody. I'll make your life hell. No, I said quietly. He blinked. What? No. You won't do any of those things. Watch me. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app I'd started when I first saw him on my doorstep. You mean this baby? I asked, making sure my voice was clear and loud. The baby you just threatened to use as a weapon against me? The baby you want to take away from its mother out of spite. His face went pale as he realized what I was doing. You just threatened to sue for custody of a child you don't want, with a woman you publicly humiliated and called useless. You just admitted that your only interest in this baby is to hurt me. I stopped the recording and smiled. How do you think that's going to play in family court? He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Here's what's actually going to happen, I continued, my voice calm and steady. You're going to leave my property right now. You're never going to contact me again. You're never going to mention this baby to anyone. And if you do, I'll make sure every family court judge in the state hears this recording. You can't. I can and I will. Because unlike you, I think ahead. I plan. I prepare for contingencies. I took a step closer to him and he actually backed away. You want to know what I'm capable of? You want to know what I can do? Look around you. Look at your life. Look at what's left of your friend group. Look at your career prospects. Look at your reputation. His face was white now, his hands shaking. I didn't have to lie about any of you. I didn't have to make anything up. I just made sure the truth came to light. And the truth is that you're all terrible people who finally faced consequences for your actions. Please, he whispered. I'll leave you alone. I won't bother you again. Just, please stop. I studied his face, this man who had once held so much power over me, who had made me feel small and worthless and broken. Now he was begging me to stop something I wasn't even doing anymore. I'm not doing anything to you, I said honestly. Your life is falling apart because that's what happens when you build it on lies and cruelty and the pain of other people. I'm just living my life, raising my baby and being happy. But nothing. You made your choices. You chose to humiliate me. You chose to surround yourself with people who thought that was funny. You chose to build a life based on hurting others. And now you're facing the consequences of those choices. I walked past him to my front door, then turned back. Oh, and one more thing. If you ever come to my house again, if you ever threaten me or my baby again, if you ever try to contact me in any way, I won't just ruin your reputation. I'll destroy you completely. And unlike this time, I won't be subtle about it. I went inside and locked the door behind me, leaving him standing in my driveway. Through the window, I watched him stumble to his car and drive away, weaving slightly as he went. Then I called Emma. We need to talk, I said when she answered. Yow. Emma arrived 20 minutes later, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. I'm so sorry, she said before I could even speak. I'm so sorry. I was drunk and he was being so pathetic, talking about how much he missed you, and I thought maybe if he knew about the baby he'd realize what an idiot he'd been. Stop, I said, holding up a hand. Just stop. We sat in my living room, the same room where my birthday party had been destroyed 2 months ago. Emma looked miserable and part of me felt bad for her. But a larger part of me was furious. Do you have any idea what you've done? I asked quietly. I know. I betrayed your trust. I put you and the baby at risk. You gave him ammunition. You gave him a weapon to use against me and my child. Emma's face crumpled. I thought he still loved you. I thought if he knew about the baby, maybe you two could work things out. Work things out. I stared at her in disbelief. Emma, he humiliated me in front of 37 people. He called me useless. He planned it, orchestrated it, made sure it would hurt as much as possible. And you thought we should work things out. I've never seen you as happy as you were with him. Before things went bad, I mean. I was never happy with him. I was performing happiness because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. I was making excuses for his cruelty because I thought that's what love looked like. I leaned forward, making sure she was really listening. Emma, he was destroying me piece by piece and I was so deep in it that I couldn't even see it happening. She was crying now, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything to fix this. You can't fix this. The damage is done. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where he'd been parked just an hour ago. But it's okay. I handled it. What do you mean? I told her about the confrontation, about the recording, about the threats and counter-threats. Emma listened with growing horror. Oh God, she whispered when I finished. What have I done? You made a mistake. A big one, but a mistake nonetheless. I turned back to her. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Anything. I'll do anything. I need you to stay away from him. Completely. No more chance encounters at bars, no more conversations about me or the baby or anything else. If you see him, you walk the other way. Done. And I need you to understand that this baby is never, ever to be mentioned to anyone else. Not your cousin, not your coworkers, not your mother. No one. I understand. Do you? Because this isn't just about protecting my privacy anymore. This is about protecting my child from a man who just threatened to use it as a weapon against me. Emma nodded frantically. I swear. I won't say anything to anyone. I studied her face, trying to decide if I could trust her. Emma had been my best friend for 8 years. She'd been there through breakups and job losses and family drama. She'd held my hair back when I was sick and celebrated with me when I got promoted. But she'd also just betrayed me in the worst possible way. I need some time, I said finally. I need to think about whether we can come back from this. Please don't shut me out, she begged. I know I messed up, but please don't end our friendship over this. I'm not ending anything. I'm just processing. This is a lot to deal with right now. After she left, I sat in my quiet apartment and tried to make sense of everything that had happened. In the span of 2 months, my entire life had been turned upside down. I'd lost my fiancé, discovered I was pregnant, systematically dismantled his social circle, and now faced the possibility of a custody battle with a man who didn't even want the child. But as I sat there, one hand resting on my still small bump, I realized something. I wasn't afraid anymore. For 2 years I'd lived in fear. Fear of his anger, fear of his disapproval, fear of not being good enough. I'd walked on eggshells, constantly trying to anticipate his moods, constantly trying to be the perfect girlfriend who never caused problems. Now for the first time in years I felt powerful. I felt in control. I felt like myself again. The next few weeks passed quietly. I didn't hear from him again, and according to Emma's carefully limited intelligence reports, he seemed to have gotten the message. He'd stopped drinking as heavily, found a new job at a smaller company, and was keeping a much lower profile. His friend group had largely disbanded. Tyler was facing criminal charges and had moved back in with his parents. Marcus was going through a messy divorce. The others had distanced themselves from the whole situation, apparently deciding that their association with him was more trouble than it was worth. I meanwhile was thriving. My pregnancy was progressing beautifully. I was 16 weeks now and the morning sickness had finally subsided. I'd started showing enough that I had to buy maternity clothes, and I found myself constantly touching my bump, marveling at the life growing inside me. Work was going well too. I'd been promoted to senior project manager, a position that came with a significant raise and much better benefits. My boss had been incredibly supportive when I told her about the pregnancy, assuring me that the company was committed to helping working mothers succeed. I'd also started seeing a therapist, Dr. Williams, who specialized in emotional abuse recovery. It had taken me a while to admit that what I'd experienced was abuse. It wasn't physical after all, and he'd never actually hit me. But Dr. Williams helped me understand that emotional abuse could be just as damaging, just as controlling, just as destructive. You've made remarkable progress, she told me during one of our sessions. When you first came to see me, you were still making excuses for his behavior. Now you're able to see the situation clearly. It's easier to see clearly when you're not in the middle of it, I said. That's true. But it's also easier when you've reclaimed your power. You've taken control of your narrative, your future, your life. That's not something everyone is able to do. I thought about that conversation as I drove home from work one evening. Had I really reclaimed my power? Or had I just traded one form of control for another? The truth was, I'd enjoyed watching his life fall apart. I'd enjoyed knowing that his friends were facing consequences for their actions. I'd enjoyed the fear in his eyes when he realized I wasn't the helpless victim he'd thought I was. But I'd also moved on. I was building a new life, a better life, a life that had nothing to do with him or revenge or getting even. I was focused on my baby, my career, my future. Maybe that was what real power looked like. Not the ability to destroy someone else, but the ability to build something better for yourself. I was 20 weeks pregnant when I saw him for the last time. I was at the grocery store picking up ingredients for dinner, when I turned the corner into the produce section and nearly ran into him. He looked better than he had the night he'd shown up at my house. Cleaner, more put together, less desperate. But there was something different about his eyes, something hollow and defeated. "Hi," he said quietly. "Hi," I replied, my hand instinctively moving to my bump. I was wearing a loose sweater, but the pregnancy was definitely visible now. He noticed the gesture and his eyes dropped to my stomach. "How far along are you?" 20 weeks. He nodded, doing the math in his head. "So it's mine." "Biologically, yes. In every other way that matters, no." We stood there in awkward silence, surrounded by apples and oranges and the mundane normalcy of grocery shopping. Other customers moved around us, oblivious to the drama playing out in the produce section. "I've been thinking," he said finally, "about what happened, about what I did. And I was wrong. The way I ended things, the way I humiliated you, it was cruel and unnecessary, and I'm sorry." I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation, for the angle he was working. But he just looked tired and sad and genuinely remorseful. "Hey," I said. "Okay. I accept your apology. Thank you for saying it." He seemed surprised by my response. "That's it. What else did you expect?" "I don't know. I thought maybe we could talk. About the baby, about us, about—" "There is no us," I said gently but firmly. "There hasn't been an us since the night you handed me that box. But the baby is mine. You made it very clear that you wanted nothing to do with me, and by extension, nothing to do with any child I might have. I didn't know about the baby then. Would it have mattered? If you'd known I was pregnant that night, would you have changed your mind about leaving me?" He opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. We both knew the truth. "I could have handled things differently," he said finally. "Yes, you could have. You could have been honest about your feelings instead of building up resentment. You could have had a private conversation instead of a public humiliation. You could have treated me with basic human decency instead of cruelty." I shifted my weight, my back starting to ache from standing. "But you didn't. And that tells me everything I need to know about who you are as a person. People can change. Maybe. But I'm not interested in finding out. I'm happy now. Really, genuinely happy. And I'm not willing to risk that happiness on the possibility that you might have learned to be a better person." He looked down at his hands. "I miss you." "No, you don't. You miss having someone to control. You miss having someone who made excuses for your bad behavior. You miss having someone who was so desperate for your approval that she'd accept crumbs and call it love." I picked up a bag of apples and put them in my cart. "But that person doesn't exist anymore. What happened to her?" I smiled, and for the first time in this conversation it was a real smile. "She grew up. She realized she deserved better. She learned that being alone is infinitely preferable to being with someone who makes you feel worthless." "And the baby? What about what the baby deserves?" "The baby deserves to grow up in a home filled with love and respect and kindness. The baby deserves to see healthy relationships modeled by the adults in its life. The baby deserves to never, ever be used as a weapon in someone else's emotional warfare." I met his eyes steadily. "Can you honestly tell me that you can provide those things?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I could try. Trying isn't good enough when it comes to a child. A child needs certainty, stability, unconditional love. A child needs parents who are emotionally healthy and capable of putting the child's needs first." I paused. "Are you emotionally healthy?" "I'm working on it." "Good. I'm glad to hear that. But working on it and being there are two different things. And I'm not willing to use my child as practice for your personal growth." "So that's it? You're just going to cut me out completely?" "I'm going to protect my child from potential harm. That's what good parents do." He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him struggling with something. Finally he nodded. "You're right," he said quietly. "You're absolutely right. I would have been a terrible father. I can barely take care of myself, let alone a child." "That's the first honest thing you've said to me in years." "I know." He looked up at me, and for just a moment, I saw a glimpse of the man I'd thought I'd fallen in love with. "For what it's worth, I think you're going to be an amazing mother." "Thank you. And for what it's worth, I really am sorry. Not just for the way I ended things, but for all of it. For making you feel small, for taking your kindness for granted, for being too selfish and immature to appreciate what I had. I felt something shift inside me, some last piece of anger finally letting go. I forgive you, I said and meant it. Really. Really. Not for your sake but for mine. And for the babies. I don't want to carry that anger anymore. He nodded, tears in his eyes. I hope you have a beautiful life. You and the baby. You deserve all the happiness in the world. Thank you. I hope you find happiness too. Real happiness, not the kind that comes from making other people feel bad. And then he walked away, disappearing around the corner into the cereal aisle, and out of my life forever. I'm sitting in the nursery, rocking my 3-month-old daughter to sleep. Her name is Hope. Not because of any grand symbolism, but because it's what I felt the moment I saw her face. Pure, uncomplicated hope for the future. He's perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, the most beautiful dark eyes I've ever seen. She sleeps through the night, smiles when she sees me, and has already wrapped my parents around her tiny finger. Emma, who I eventually forgave after many long conversations and a sincere commitment to rebuilding trust, is her devoted godmother. I never heard from him again after that day in the grocery store. According to the occasional updates that filter through mutual acquaintances, he moved to another city, got a new job, and is apparently in therapy. I hope that's true. I hope he's learning to be a better person, not for my sake or even for Hope's, but for his own. As for me, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I have a job I love, a daughter who lights up my world, and a support system of people who actually care about my well-being. I'm dating again. Nothing serious yet, but I'm open to the possibility of love. Real love this time, the kind built on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than control and manipulation. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how everything played out. If I regret the systematic dismantling of his friend group, the careful orchestration of consequences, the cold calculation of it all. The answer is no. I don't regret any of it. Those men made choices. They chose to participate in my humiliation. They chose to build their lives on lies and cruelty and the exploitation of others. They chose to laugh while I was being destroyed. I didn't create their problems, I just made sure their problems caught up with them. I didn't lie about any of them, I just made sure the truth came to light. I didn't destroy their lives, I just stopped protecting them from the natural consequences of their own actions. And in doing so I learned something valuable. I am not helpless. I am not useless. I am not someone who can be discarded without consequence. I am a woman who thinks ahead, who plans carefully, who protects what matters to her. I am a woman who understands that sometimes justice requires patience, strategy, and the willingness to play a longer game than your opponents. Most importantly, I am a woman who knows her own worth. And that knowledge, more than any revenge, more than any payback, more than any elaborate scheme, is the most powerful thing of all. Hope stirs in my arms, making the soft little sounds that mean she's dreaming. I kiss the top of her head and whisper the promise I make to her every night. You will never ever settle for less than you deserve. You will never let anyone make you feel small. And you will always know how much you are loved. Outside it's starting to rain. But inside, in this room filled with soft light and baby toys and the quiet breathing of my sleeping daughter, everything is perfect. Everything is exactly as it should be. And if that's not the best revenge of all, I don't know what is.